We'll recall our December 16th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting to order. At this moment, we'll entertain a motion for the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we adopt the agenda as is, following policy BDE for board discussion.
Second.
Okay, properly moving second. There's an amendment request.
Oh, I have a question. I wanted to just make one item, 3A, change it from action to information. So do I need to do that when we're accepting the agenda?
3A.
Yeah, 3A.
Oh, okay.
That's
the same one.
Okay, so can I amend, Cindy, would you be okay if we change?
So you
my
don't want
name?
to take action on that today?
Don't want to take, that should just be information because that group is updating us and asking that other group for more information. I don't think we need to take action.
I don't think it's something we need to have approval
So
on.
the committee can ask for that without
Yes.
getting the board's approval?
Correct.
Okay, yes.
Okay, so then I'm amending Cindy's motion to have changed 3A from action to information only.
Okay, are we clear?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep,
We're gonna,
yep.
all right, if you can, cast your vote, please, for the adoption with the amendment change. Okay, that motion passes. Before we go into the election of the Committee of the Whole Chair, I just want to take this time to do an acknowledgement of condolences. Today we take time to acknowledge the loss of one of our beloved students. Today we remember a young Midland Park primary school student, Cordell Davis, who passed away Friday, December 13th. It is with great sadness that I ask you to pray with me for this young person whose life was taken too soon, and for the Davis family during this time of bereavement. Let us pray. For all those who woke this morning to the loneliness of bereavement, the empty bed or chair, an unaccomplished quietness, a life now incomplete. May they know your presence in the stillness of the day and through the love of friends who offer their condolences. And in the darker moments, may they reach out to hold your hand and feel the warmth of the one who has already passed from death to life, to welcome others into God's kingdom. We ask blessings, we ask prayers upon this Davis family in their time of bereavement. In Jesus' name we pray, for Christ's sake. Amen.
I've got a motion.
At this time now, we entertain a motion.
I've got a motion. I'd like to nominate Todd Garrett for Chair of the Committee of the Whole.
Second.
It's been properly moved and second that Todd Garrett name come forth as Committee of the Whole Chair. Are there any questions? Hearing none, we ask that you please cast your vote.
Vote manually since you're not logged. Are you logged in?
Who's taking it?
Julie's right here.
No.
Okay, that motion passes 7-2. At this time now, I'll turn the gavel over to Mr. Garrett to preside the remaining portion of the Committee of the Whole.
All right, Mr. Chairman, the next item up is the public comments. We've got 20 speakers. If you will please come up, I'll call 3 of you in a row, and then if you'll come up and be ready to speak. The first ones we've got is Melanie Hammond-Trace, followed by Chappy McKay and Brian Danbury.
Good afternoon. I'm Melanie Hammond-Trace. I am currently the 2019 Chair of the Charleston Metro Chamber of Commerce. First, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for your service here to our county. It really means a lot to us. Second thing is I would like to point out that Colonel Adams, Colonel, if you'd stand, is here with us today from Joint Base Charleston, and he's here to show support of quality education for the military and their dependents. Thank you, Colonel, for making time for us today. The Chamber supports Charleston County School District's goal of creating greater student equity and academic opportunities system-wide. Every child deserves access to a high-quality education. That is not happening right now, and particularly in communities with high poverty levels. Our public schools in Charleston are highly polarized by income and also by race. 50 of the district's 85 schools, about 60%, are either high poverty or very low poverty. Study after study has pointed out that Charleston County School District is in many ways two separate school systems, and that must change. The slate of recommended changes, some of which were approved in November and some of which are before you today, represent a necessary departure from the status quo and will begin to improve access and outcomes for low-income students. I realize change is hard, but we have to start somewhere. I urge you to vote in favor of these changes to improve access for all the students in our county. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Chappy McKay, followed by Brian Danbury and Fran Clasby.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett.
Thank you.
I am Chappy McKay, a partner in Trident Construction. I live in the city of Charleston. I was educated in both public and private schools in Charleston County. St. Andrews Elementary School. I attended junior achievement at North Charleston High School, and my daughter attended SOA. My mother was a Charleston County Teacher of the Year while she was at Mary Ford School teaching special ed. As a businessman, my company could not stay in business if it were not for the steady stream of qualified high school graduates from Charleston County School District, Berkeley, and Dorchester counties. First, thank you, board members, for your dedicated service to our children and your friendship. I know too often you are putting our families ahead of your families and businesses. I appreciate that. We are so very fortunate to have such dedicated professionals. Today, I'm addressing you as a local construction business owner and a member of the Charleston Chamber. The Chamber recently completed a study of the job opportunities in our region. In the construction sector alone, there are over 400 job openings and another 1,100 to come available in the next 5 years. I believe those numbers are greatly understated when I look around and see what our needs are. In this highly competitive market, we have no difficulty identifying and recruiting college graduates. With construction science backgrounds, college graduates are economically able to move and relocate to Charleston from anywhere in the country. We are challenged to find qualified local young high school graduates ready to enter the construction trades. Our challenge is to find high school graduates 18 years and older with basic math skills, logic, and a positive all-in attitude. I applaud Charleston County School District and for working with the technical schools in the Chamber and local businesses for setting up opportunities. Instrumental in these efforts are the career academies, youth apprenticeship, and joint certification programs. I do not begin to know the complexity of your business, but rely on the board to be the eyes and ears of the community to address our needs. I rely on senior leadership to formulate that, and our teachers, to help educate our children. I'm going a little bit long, but what I really just am asking is that y'all look to these children, create economic opportunities in these communities that are greatly challenged, and to come together as a board and speak in one voice to create these opportunities for these wonderful high school graduates. I apologize for going long.
Thank you.
Mr. Garrett.
Next up, Mr. Brian Deerberry, followed by Fran Clasby and Shannon Hall.
Thank you, Todd. Good afternoon. I'm Brian Deerberry, President and CEO of the Charleston Metro Chamber. The Chamber represents 1,700 businesses in our metro area who employ more than 170,000 people. These employers are the heartbeat of our area economy. They, like you, act on what is best for our region and well-being of our citizens. Their charting of a brighter tomorrow has them embracing a guiding principle for everyone in our region to have the opportunity to live, learn, and earn. We believe that a high-quality education is the key to opening the door to economic mobility. We are proud of our high-performing Charleston Public Schools and want to see them continue to provide rigorous academics and garner national recognition. We also want to see more students from high-poverty schools with the academic ability to succeed access these schools and form a student body who better represents the whole county. Having served as a chamber leader for several decades in different communities, I've witnessed the transformative wins that take place in a community whenever a school board makes changes which positively impact students' ability to gain equitable access to high-quality academic opportunities. There is no civic role of greater importance than being a school board member. I want to thank you for your leadership. Margaret Mead has said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world." I want to applaud your leadership in advance for making a decision this evening that will change each student's world who realizes better and more accessible opportunities to learn at their highest level. Thank you for addressing inequities and expanding access to high-quality education with a sense of urgency by approving these priorities tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Fran Clasby, Shannon Hall, followed by Jackie Drescher.
Good afternoon. Thank you again for serving as our trustees, and thank you, Superintendent. I'm here for two purposes. I'm on the District 20 board, and I'm here to support your mission-critical recommendations to change zoning, but I'm also here to help you in that motion, and I want to keep this brief. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Shannon Hall, Jackie Dresser, followed by Nina Field Britt.
Good day. I'm Shannon Hall. My company is Design Systems for Life. I'm a wellness design consultant. With regards to the master marketing agreement, I respectfully ask for you to fully cancel the agreement with Milestone Communications. It is a 10-year agreement which started in 2017. It auto-renews each year after that unless it's canceled in writing. Each site may eventually have 2 to 3 towers that can go higher by 20% total of the height without community input. Questions to have on hand to think about. How is Milestone Communications going to ensure children do not climb the tower? What does its backup battery system look like? Diesel, gas, toxic battery? How do you propose to keep the land and children safe from leakage of such system? How often is the maintenance? What kind of insurance does Milestone have for the safety, accidents, or the health effects? How often is Milestone going to monitor the towers to stay within FCC limits? Do you know that if they take into consideration the densification of this system and layering in of other tech and unlicensed towers, not to mention the commercial products and in the schools, phone systems, and tablet emissions, do you know that that is really dangerous? You guys are frying yourselves right now. I applaud your decisions, however, to test the water supply for lead at all the schools. However, the EMF, RF, and the real possibility of the tower installs on each school property, you're basically going right into the frying pan. I beg that you place a baseline study of EMF and RF at each school. I beg that you put a precautionary plan in place. I wish to ask quickly, can anyone up there tell me that you know the difference between an AM wave or an FM wave? If you cannot, without looking at your phone right now, feel that you can do this, then I ask you to hire a competent professional to help you make this decision. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Next up, Shannon Hall, Jackie Drescher, Nina Field Britt, followed by Karen Foster.
Jackie, you're up next.
You're up next. Sorry.
Sorry, I jumped up too quickly. I thought I was third on the list, but they added a few at the beginning. I've learned a lot in the past 6 months. I've spoken with and listened to more people than I can count, and you probably have too. And although I'm speaking now, I've tried to listen more often than talk, especially with people who have different opinions, because that's how I learn. I heard someone refer to Boost and Academic Magnet as a brand, a successful brand, but a brand. And my marketing background, if I think back that far, has taught me that tampering with a successful brand sometimes causes it to fail because elements change. The small size of our K-8 school is a huge part of our success. And I'm sure you've seen successful businesses expand only to fail. Our kids are not buy-in capital for a company expansion. They're kids. So please don't tamper with our success by expanding to 2 campuses. Keep our K through 8 together. We have to improve schools, and so that schools across the district, so every child has access to a quality education at every school. And if something is working, replicate it. If something is not working at some schools, make them better so that everyone has access. And if any of you are about to cast a reluctant vote for change, because a few people have said we've just got to do this, I will leave you with one last thought. If thousands of people from every walk of life, and I've talked to them over the last 6 months, from every socioeconomic background, from every racial background, from schools all over the district, failing and successful, and the legislative delegation, think these are not the right things to do, is it possible, even probable, that these proposals are not in the best interest of the kids you are striving to help? Listen to your gut, and if you have any doubt, there is a reason. Please vote against these sweeping changes because every vote counts, and we are counting on you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Ms. Nina Field Britt, followed by Karen Foster, and then Reverend Isaac Moore.
Hello, I'm Nina Fields Britt.
Excuse me, I apologize, Nina. Yep.
I'm a resident of District 20 and abused parent. Wednesday night, the board unveiled yet another proposal for Buist, at least the 7th since June. Despite parents and the legislative delegation's request for input, clarity, and transparency, there is a seemingly relentless effort to proceed with unpopular, unsupported, and unvetted proposals for our schools, notwithstanding negative consequences for academic programs, students, and communities. As such, I have little hope that some of you will listen to why any proposal that strips away K through 2 from Buist is detrimental to a program with a proven track record of success and should be rejected. But I do hope you'll listen to this. Wednesday's 11th hour proposal not only runs counter to promises made to Buist and Memminger parents, it renders the superintendent's comments to parents earlier that day misleading at best, perpetuating parents' concerns about transparency. And while I understand you may remove from consideration the aspect of the proposal that would effectively disenroll 2 grades from Buist and displace those students despite repeated assurances to the contrary, regardless, I am concerned that the apparent willingness to uproot first and second graders was spurred by a desire to gain D20 parents' buy-in for CCSD's proposed new program at Memminger. The thought process of some board members apparently being that Buist students would lure parents of rising kindergartners into enrolling their children in that program, a mindset that quite frankly should be offensive to all of us. The notion that any board member would view 6-year-olds as bait to gain parental acceptance of a program is outrageous, and that any board member believes it is acceptable to uproot existing CCSD elementary students to use them as bait is alarming. The very fact that this mindset exists should give each of you pause and is reason enough to reject these proposals for Buist and Memminger. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Ms. Karen Foster, followed by Reverend Isaac Moore, and then Lisa Covert.
Hi, it's Karen Foster. I emailed all of the board members on Wednesday. Thank you, Mr. Garrett, for actually calling me and speaking to me about the email. My child is at Buist, so I'm gonna basically just repeat what Nina just said. I don't necessarily disagree with the idea of giving more access to Buist at the higher grades. I don't know that what you're proposing is gonna solve the problem you're trying to fix, but what I do know is that I signed my child up to go to Buist. I did not sign him up to go to a non-existent program at Memminger. I don't think it's fair for me to have to wonder if I'm going to have to jump through more hoops when he gets to 3rd grade, because the current proposal doesn't tell me what happens to my son in 3rd grade when he is up to go back to Buist, maybe. So I'm really here just to make sure that you follow through on what you said on Friday and change the bullet point that if you pass all of these changes to Buist, the current kindergarten and 1st graders are not removed from the community they have already gotten used to. My son loves school. He did not love his neighborhood school last year. I don't want to have to move him again and risk him joining a community that he doesn't know and doesn't like. And I hope the rest of the board will allow Mr. Garrett to make that change. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Reverend Isaac Moore, followed by Lisa Covert, and then Lisa Ruda.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
As a military member for 22 years in the military, I've traveled different bases and different places and seen different schools. And one of the time I remember when we had to take our child out of one of the schools we went to, that the turmoil that was caused by that move, because they loved the school, was so good or so bad for them that it caused us concern. One of the things I would like to ask the school board to do is look at the psychological impacts that all these changes are making or might have on our students. To look at maybe getting social scientists or psychiatrists to look at the changes, to look at impacts of children in these type of move, how it affects them, not only now, but in the long term. I don't know if you've done it yet, but I recommend that someone do that or the board do that. I'm also looking at, or would like the board to consider, as a longtime resident here, of all the changes that are being made. We have made these changes. I've lived here 69 years. We've made changes like this all of my life that I've lived in Charleston. And we have done this, and the school board and Charleston County School Board have gone through changes after changes after changes. And every time we get a new board, a new superintendent, we make more changes. This type of continuous changes will have a long-term effect on our parents, our schools, and everything in this community. We need to look at that before we make changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Ms. Lisa Covert, Lisa Ruda, then Natasha Jefferson.
Hi, thank you. I'm here today to speak on behalf of members of the Memminger community, in particular 205 people who signed a petition last week in opposition to some of their most recent proposals that came out on Wednesday. And I want to note that people often say that Memminger parents are not engaged. The fact that we were able to gain all of these signatures in one day in order to send them back to you, I think is evidence that Memminger parents are paying attention, are engaged, and do have a lot to say about this. I just wanted to read the petition. We sent it all to the board members, but I know you all have been inundated with emails. The main demands of the petition are that the Memminger community wants the board to maintain our neighborhood attendance zone, maintain our CD3 and CD4 programs, keep our amazing teachers, maintain our social emotional learning curriculum, grow our relationship with the College of Charleston, which submitted last week a proposal for a partnership. A relationship with the College of Charleston that aims to serve all students, demand that if there's an advanced academic program implemented at Memminger, that it runs through 5th grade instead of just 2nd, demand that the board explain to us what positive changes will be made for our current students, as well as the students who do not test into advanced academic programming. We demand that the board hire a strong principal who will stand up for us as a school and a community, and we want a seat at the table to discuss future changes. In closing, we want to stop the proposed changes to Memminger that will likely turn it into an expansion tool and feeder for Buist, and start engaging the Memminger family, listen to how our students and children can be better served by the district. And I have here all of the signatures. Again, we sent them to you. These are members of the Memminger community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Ms. Lisa Ruda, followed by Ms. Natasha Jefferson, and then Ms. Tanang Williams.
Good afternoon. Black students in Charleston have not received a quality education for over 50 years. You have proposed some drastic changes to improve our failing schools. Some changes affect schools with majority white populations. Some parents in these schools don't like how these changes might affect their children, so they have asked you to slow down. What's the rush? Members of the Low Country delegation asked you last Friday. Not having hundreds of minority students in failing schools again next year should be the rush for change. The fact that a child will spend another year in a failing school is the crisis that needs to slow down. Why change the goose that is laying the golden egg, the delegation asked you in reference to academic magnet, where most students are white? CCSD wants to make changes so minority students have a better shot of getting into academic magnet. Supported by the school's alumni, you want to make changes to open the doors to more students to go see what a golden egg is. CCSD board, you have looked for new ideas, and some of those new ideas, you've looked outside of Charleston to do that. Changes have been tried in the past with new principles, new programs within CCSD, but there haven't been any golden eggs laid in our failing schools, just empty goose eggs year after year after year. Please know that Charleston Rise, its 145 alumni that I represent, wholeheartedly supports your efforts to try new solutions and look outside of Charleston for help. When you put your heads down tonight and you look to measure whether you did a good job, please measure it not by whether adults are happy. Measure it by whether students are successful and ready to learn and lead both within your school walls and outside. Children, all children, measure your success by them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Ms. Natasha Jefferson, followed by Ms. Shannon Williams, followed by Elizabeth Hamilton.
Good afternoon. I'm Natasha Jefferson. I manage the School Board Accountability Team at Charleston Rise. We attend every committee of the whole and Board of Trustees meeting. Last year, when you all mentioned there were 15 predominantly black failing schools, I could choose where to sit because this room was so empty. But now that you are trying to fix a 50-plus year problem with accelerating schools and magnet schools that may cause for some of our black and brown children to enter predominantly white schools and the opportunity for children at failing schools to have the quality education, you better get here early because you won't find a seat. These type of changes scares some people, but I need you all to stay strong and continue to represent all students. You have a good plan that can work, but I keep hearing freeze, pause, and what's the rush? If you keep pausing and playing freeze tag with the children of color's education, we'll never have a fair shot at closing the achievement gap that is present. What's the rush? Our children need a high-quality education now. Tomorrow is too late. When the parents of Buse and Mount Pleasant came in red, a statement was made saying, we can't ignore all these people in red. We need to listen. But I stand to you today in blue, representing the parents who are not present, who cannot make it to these meetings, asking you to continue to do what's right in your heart and push forward to educating all children. Charleston Rise supports the board moving forward with acceleration schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next up is Ms. Shannon Williams, followed by Ms. Elizabeth Hamilton, followed by Ms. Sarah Johnson.
Greetings all. My name is Shannon Williams. It's really painful to stand up here today. I'm the Wayland Neighborhood Association president, and I have tried to serve on the Student Improvement Council at Burns unsuccessfully. I'm a proud member of Charleston Rise. I have a 10-year-old grandson, and I want to tell you, when I was away on vacation, I got a call saying that my grandson wanted to kill himself in your school. He attends Burns upstairs because he's not allowed to attend downstairs in Meeting Street, Burns. While I was away this past week, I heard that the delegation came and asked the school board to wait. Let me share what waiting has cost my grandson. For the past 5 years, at CCSD school system, my grandson has been bullied on the bus and in school, retained, and according to school standard, he is going backwards. How does this student with an IEP accommodation test in the 77th percentile in the beginning of the school year, and when retested in the second part of the year, lands in the first percentile? Why is that not a problem? The 77th percentile is a reflection of the work that we put in the summer with him, and the first percent is on the school. This year, my grandson was given a failing grade for a class which his teachers could not produce the work they used to give him the grade. Because during his accommodations, during his meeting on election day to look at his data, I asked them to produce it and they could not. I knew we were in trouble this year on the first day when I asked his teachers when he would be receiving his accommodations, and they didn't even know he had an IEP. My story, my complaint, and my concerns are very real. The delegation is asking to slow down on making changes, and that's scary. For the past 20-plus years, education has been on a dangerous decline. When was the last time the school board or the delegates went into the schools and truly evaluated what they have been implementing? How many of the school board members or delegates have children that attend any of these schools in question? Our children are being damaged educationally and emotionally on top of all the other conditions they have to face. School board and delegations members need to go into these schools and really look at what's going on. Before Burns closed, the old building, the state came in and spoke with a hand-picked group of parents. My grandson's teacher at the time asked me to attend the meeting. They were all singing the same song. However, my experiences were not based on previous attendance or my loyalty to Burns. My comments reflected the here and now and the fact that my grandson was not receiving a high-quality education that he deserves. Change has got to happen for the future success of our youth. We cannot continue to wait to further allow change not to happen. Look at the results of how not providing a high-quality education and what waiting has produced. Children who cannot read, parents who cannot read, children receiving felony records at elementary school, children killing other children and or themselves. Waiting is not an option. We need transparency, better communication practices, and follow through. Our children are destined for greatness, not the grave or the jail. Our children deserve a high-quality education. Thank you for allowing me to get that out, because it hurt me to come up here to do this.
Thank you.
Thanks to know.
All right, next up is Mrs. Elizabeth Hamilton, followed by Ms. Sarah Johnson and Mr. Todd Williams.
Every child deserves to be challenged academically in their neighborhood school. Academic acceleration should not be something that exists solely at Buist, solely at Memminger. It should be in every single neighborhood school. Mr. Garrett, I appreciate the time you spent speaking with so many concerned parents over the weekend and Friday. But the program you designed and described as students who passed a test going to one set of classrooms and students who passed a test going to another set of classrooms, and those who were in the neighborhood zone went to traditional classrooms, but they could use the same cafeteria, they could use the same playground. Dare I say, they might even use the same water fountain. That is not what CCSD should be creating as a solution to a lack of academic rigor in our schools. There are 100 seats at play at CCSD Buist Academy. We've created scarcity with winners and losers. You've changed the language from attending high poverty zone schools to zoned for high poverty. Let me tell you who's zoned for high poverty schools. Every resident in Park Circle who's zoned for North Charleston Elementary. Every resident who lives south of Broad who's zoned for Memminger or Mitchell or Sanders-Clyde. So please, the pretense that these changes are about increasing access for the same students that Charleston Rise is advocating for is out the window with the latest set of proposals. I appreciate your time, I appreciate your concern, but when we have a matter of hours to look at proposals that have been live for 2 business days, mistakes will be made and our children will pay the price. Thank you.
Thank you. And next up is Ms. Sarah Johnson, followed by Mr. Todd Williams, and then Ms. Carol Temple.
Hey, everyone. I'm Sarah Johnson. I'm speaking today in my capacity as a co-leader of Community Voice for Education. We're a teacher, parent advocacy group that's been around for 8 years now, and we are not the status quo. We want meaningful change. There's got to be community buy-in. We agree with the families, educators, and stakeholders, and the legislative delegation, all who are asking you to go back to the drawing board on the sweeping changes that have not been vetted in the community. We're concerned in particular about the solicitation of third parties to provide comprehensive educational and administrative management of some of the acceleration zone schools. Any proposed plan like that huge, should first be clearly communicated to each school community and then vetted by each community. We have more than 6,000 students that are currently in the acceleration schools and many, many more that will come through. Parents and teachers want to know, when are you going to engage Burke High School, Simmons Pinckney Middle, Mitchell Elementary? When will you engage Sanders Clyde Elementary, Meminger Elementary, Stono Park Elementary? When will you engage North Charleston High School, Morningside Middle, Mary Ford Elementary? When are you going to engage Goodwin Elementary, Burns Elementary, Hunley Park Elementary? When will you engage North Charleston Elementary, Pepper Hill Elementary, Chicora Elementary? Please stop barreling forward. Take time to engage with each and every school community that's on your disruption list. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Todd Williams, followed by Mrs. Carol Temple and Mr. Maurice Washington.
Good afternoon. I recognize the board is trying to make difficult and unpopular decisions to address inequities in our various schools. My concern, however, is that I believe unintended consequences that will flow from your decisions. Specifically, the current proposals would eliminate the kindergarten program at Buse without a successor program in place. Families are already making plans and enrolling their children for the next school year, and this new program does not even exist. Meminger does not have a principal this year, Meminger does not have a principal in place for the next school year. This vote effectively tears down one house before beginning construction on the new home where we want to live. I understand the board wants to address problems or inequities at Buse, and that can be done by simply changing the admission criteria. Use the kindergarten readiness assessment exam instead of the recent testing process that led to problems, and designate it as a partial or whole constituent magnet for District 20. But the current proposal ends one program without having a replacement in place for the 2020 school year, and this is December, and parents are already making plans for the upcoming school year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Ms. Carol Temple, followed by Mr. Maurice Washington, and then Mr. Charles Cole.
Good afternoon, board members and superintendent. After Friday's meeting between the CCSD board and the Charleston delegation, it's very clear that the proposed disruptions for schools are very troublesome. Communities have a right to know and fully understand how the board's proposed plans will be effective for students to have equity of access to CCSD schools, as well as improve student achievement. CCSD is being too vague on its Title I schools designated as acceleration schools. We can't trust something will be better when we don't know what is planned, or why solicitations for managing partners was initiated and why an advisory committee was appointed if there was never an intention to hire third-party managers for the schools. As suggested in my recent email to all of you, the community schools model needs to be used to fully engage teachers, principals, parents in each school, as well as the School Improvement Council, to identify the changes, waivers, and community partners needed for school success. That's what's been missing from the critical, mission-critical process. So I suggest it's time to go to the schools and work with these communities of schools to make the schools better. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Maurice Washington, followed by Charles Cole, and then Ms. Ashley Wright.
Good evening. Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing this forum. Let me first say, for whatever it's worth, no one hired or that's employed by Charleston County School District has asked me to appear before you today because the question was asked as I was walking in. Look, your jobs are hard, and I, for one, appreciate what you do. It's thankless, but nonetheless, you do it. It doesn't pay anything, but nonetheless, you do it. You've had study after study after study with no implementation. Finally, you're about to implement something. And I think that's a good thing. I don't know if it's the right thing, but it's a good thing. It's a good thing because too many of our kids are being left behind. It's adversely impacting quality of life in neighborhoods and certainly our local economy. So doing something is a good thing. However, I don't think you can do it alone. You're having to work through challenges that are just sent down to you every single year from the federal, state level, from gentrification, particularly the impact that TIFs have on gentrifying our neighborhoods and communities, overdevelopment, and of course, poverty. These are horrendous conditions that you must deal with in the process of educating all children equally. Now, again, I don't know if your position is right or wrong, but I do know if you're morally driven, if your positions are morally driven rather than politically driven, then none of you are wrong. All of you are right. So I urge you, just maintain some level of courage, move forward in the way that you believe is the most responsible way in which to move. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is Mr. Charles Cole, Miss Ashley Wright, and then Mr. Ryan Comeback.
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Cole, and even though I know that this has actually been a long time in the making for me and a lot of others here, I really only became aware of this in June. A couple months later, I actually came here and spoke out against what I perceived as a lack of clear plan with any details. And while I still feel that that is true, I'm looking at that as an opportunity going forward. I have a first grader at Buist, a 4-year-old who is going to be a rising kindergartner, and a 2-year-old. So I am the exact family that is going, one of them that's going to be affected by some of these changes specifically to Buist. I heard a lot of rumors about the board members and theories of the superintendent's real motivation for forcing these changes now, and parents were angry about it, and I get it. I was angry too, but after speaking personally with the superintendent and with some board members, I realized that their motivations are good, and that these rumors that I heard were not true at all. I've been inspired by the Mitchell and Memminger communities showing up at the listening sessions, and I have honestly cringed listening to some of the Buist community, knowing how, even though I know they are most concerned about their kids' education, it comes across differently. Change is different. People resist change. Even when everything tells us we need to change, people do not like change. But the elementary schools in District 20, besides Buist, are ranked towards the worst in South Carolina, and this state isn't exactly leading the country in public education. It is unacceptable to allow these schools to continue to fail those it serves. I believe CCSD has tried to improve the schools, and now the superintendent is looking for a different solution that has seen success in other places. And of course, it's not perfect, but it seems the time to resist change has passed. Instead, let's take advantage of this lack of a complete plan and instill our influence into these decisions. Come up with some selection criteria for the acceleration programs. For Buist, I don't want the school to change, and it's great. But I hear and understand the sentiment questioning why CCSD would want to change a top-rated elementary school. But thinking about it from a different perspective, they're trying to increase the number of seats at this top-rated school in order to increase the number of opportunities for kids to be able to attend this kind of school. And it's hard to argue with that sentiment. And the fact that they want to give D20 kids the priority, in my opinion, is a welcome change. So let's let these changes happen, but let's go.
Cole, if you could, sorry about that.
No,
no, you can finish your point. I apologize.
Just say, there are still some unresolved changes, and I want the board to, though not delaying the vote to change, continue to listen to the parents and work toward the fine-tuning these plans to make it successful. Thank you very much for all you do.
Thank you. Next up, Ms. Ashley Wright, followed by Mr. Ryan Comeback, who is our last final speaker.
I'm here today because I would like some clarity as to how the new plan could possibly serve your board goals. Everyone in this room agrees that the board has set admirable goals with a focus on equity and access to our public schools. But unfortunately, the current proposals fall short of achieving equity or access. Your proposal for Buist eliminates arguably the most critical part of the program, kindergarten through second grade, where children are prepared for success. All research points towards educators reaching children early, yet the board has proposed a plan that excludes the most vulnerable students. And why are we taking such a drastic measure? To add additional seats at Buist for students zoned for District 20 and poverty schools. This isn't a new approach. Buist already gives priority to District 20, and in fact, 45% of the student body is from District 20. District 20 is well represented at Buist Academy. Further, Buist has a failing school district list, which is synonymous with the poverty schools. Neither of these lists makes any significant contribution to diversity. We can't keep doing the same things and expecting a different result. These changes don't address any of the concerns raised by the Charleston Rise speakers. And you may hear support from this plan for those who don't want to pay for private school. But is that really who you have in mind when you talk about serving the underserved? If so, you need to clarify the board goals today. You need to clarify it for all of us in the room. You need to clarify it for the Post and Courier. You need to clarify it for Channel 5, because we want to understand who the underserved is and who you're trying to benefit. If you truly want to serve the underserved, let's look at the schools that you have deemed underperforming, and let's look at their school improvement plans. What are they telling you they need? Do they need a principal? Give them one. Why not put the same time and attention into these schools that you've put into coming up with a new plan for Buist? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Ryan Comeback, and you're our final speaker this morning.
Right, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Comeback, and I have had the pleasure of serving you for the last 14 years as a classroom teacher, a high school assistant principal, middle school principal, and most recently the principal at West Ashley High School. However, I think my most important job is the father of 2 little girls in your district. I'm here this afternoon to say thank you. Thank you for taking the necessary steps to bring equity and access to the students of Charleston County School District. I would like you all to know that we appreciate what you're doing, the decisions that you're making. We, meaning the principals that I've spoken to, the very many principals I've spoken to, the teachers, you're doing the right thing. Your work is tough. It is led by the right intentions and families who want the very best for their kids. And when you mix in social media, it becomes even more difficult to do. But you're doing the right thing. And I'm proud to work in your district. I'm proud to serve the students in your district. And I want to help you and work with you to make sure that your bold decisions and actions are met with fidelity and bring true, meaningful changes to our district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the public comment section of our committee of the whole. The next item up is recommendations for solicitation for interest, and I will actually turn this over to Ms. Jeffrey.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to point out that under policy BDE, all of these items are discussed for 10 minutes, and none of them are discussed for more than 10 minutes without an affirmative majority vote of the board. That is the policy we put in place for setting our agendas.
Thank you for the reminder on that. Okay, Ms. Jeffrey.
Actually, I didn't serve on the committee that looked at the groups. Robin Jones did. So, Robin, if you could just give the bottom line on the vetting committee's progress to date and what your next steps are, please. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Board Chair, board members, Dr. Postawait, I was fortunate to lead the facilitation for our first round of vetting for the solicitations for interest. We did have representation from the 3 board members. We had representation from D20 and D4 with 5 community representatives. We also had 2 teachers and a principal serve. And if you would like to know their names, I'll be glad to share that as well. After a collaborative review process, we actually took all the solicitation of interest. We had a rubric that we reviewed, the parts of the rubric, which were kind of aligned with what was proposed and what was published for the entities to look at. There were 5 entities that we did review that evening. I think there were more, but based on our early review, there were 4 that maybe fit into a different kind of category. After a review, we, in a collaborative effort, we discussed each one of the entities, and then every participant gave me a summary statement. After that summary statement, then we combined that basically to a final statement. And in the end, 4 of the entities, we, as a collaborative group, and I'm saying we, I was not a part of the final decision as serving as a facilitator, the group decided that they would, table it. They would not move them forward. But one entity was recommended to move forward for further information only.
Are there any questions?
I move to request further information from Ventures in Education PLA.
Mr. Chair, this has been turned into an information item.
Okay, got it. All right, excuse me.
Are there any questions?
I want to make sure I understand your statement. You're looking for information from one company only?
We reviewed 5, but after discussion, and we broke up into teams and then shared and collaborated on a final decision, but each member made a final statement as well independently, and one entity was moved forward to basically request additional information.
So what happened, what's with the other ones, the other 4?
The decision was made to not move forward in requesting further information.
Not move forward for information, or?
Not move forward, period.
Or dismiss them, is what you mean to say?
Yes.
Dismiss those other 4?
Yep. Yes, sir.
And keep the 1, okay, and that's the, that company was the, which company was getting the information for?
Requesting additional information on Ventures in Education PLA.
Ventures, okay. Okay.
Any other questions?
Is that to look at managing all 15 schools? Or?
I think the entity would have to then respond with how, if we move it forward, how they would want to work with us as a partner.
No, not at all.
So we're looking at one school then?
Not looking at managing any school. I believe the request is for information was to ask them for data on how the students are achieving in the places where they're working.
No, that's not what I meant. What I meant is that if the company is successful and we bring the company on board, are we looking at them running one school or 15 schools?
We're not looking at them running any schools as far as I know.
Any other questions? Thank you. Innovative and elective courses requiring local board approval. Any questions?
I move to approve the courses submitted.
Second. So I have a question.
Yep.
How will this affect the staffing structure for the new courses? Not the renewed ones, but we're adding the new courses. What will that do to our staffing structure? Because we're sitting there with one piece of pie that we keep taking money and setting aside for.
Mrs. Coates, I believe that these courses were designed by teachers who are already at the school who would like to teach an elective, so it doesn't directly require hiring more staff, but it does require balancing out the provision of the required courses that these teachers may teach. But these are courses that the principals are requesting to teach with using existing staff.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we're voting.
Should only be at one, though?
There are courses for schools.
We were sent a list.
Various locations.
All different schools, different levels.
Reverend College, you vote?
Yeah.
That passed. Report regarding waivers that may be requested for acceleration schools.
I have a question. Oh, is somebody making a presentation?
I think that Trevor Stroderman is simply going to explain the process of meeting with our principals, and this is for information. Today, we indicated we would bring back some information to the board. We won't bring a request for action until at least January. Mr. Stroderman.
Thank you, Dr. Postwaite. Chairman Mack, Vice Chair Darby, the rest of the board. Just to briefly summarize, we did gather all 15 principals here at the district office on December 9th to discuss the possible waivers that we could seek out as a district. First would have to be approved through the local school board, and through collaboration and collective responses from the group of 15 principals, they came up with 3 ideas, 4 state waivers, and those 3 waivers would be in the areas of teacher certification, teacher evaluation, and also minimum seat time requirement. We then asked that the principals take these 3 ideas back to the school level, to their faculty and staffs to get input, possibility to bring back more ideas or refine what we already have in place to just inform the staff and faculty where we're at, what the waivers actually meant, and then we could move forward.
So does the seat time requirement include the potential for longer school year, longer school days?
No, ma'am, that's more in the area of, for example, a high school course. To give credit, you need to be in a seat in a classroom in South Carolina for a minimum of 120 hours. That equates to about, you can miss 5 days a semester. So there are other places using innovative ideas for students to gain credits, and maybe they don't have to sit in the class for 120 hours.
So did you look, were there any discussion around the longer school years or longer school days as being one of the potential requests you would make?
The idea was brought up, but it wasn't as a whole. We were kind of looking at the collective group. It was brought up, however, it was not pushed forward.
And if I might add, the reason it wasn't pushed forward is that we've received feedback from the state asking us not to ask for that on a district-wide basis or in a lot of schools, but school by school. If a school wants to extend the school day or school year, we may do that school by school, but they've asked us not to do that as district as a whole.
So you still have the option of doing that if
Yes,
you need
ma'am.
to? Okay.
School by school.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
And just for clarity on teacher certification, this would be alternative certification methods or different experiential credits that people could use to be certified to teach in a classroom? Is that what that's about?
Yes, sir. For example, a lot of these schools, it's hard to find certified staff. They start the year with substitutes, and it's just a challenge. So, for example, you may have a bilingual candidate who has a degree in marketing, but they can speak Spanish, and we have a Spanish vacancy over here, so it gives us flexibility where they wouldn't have to go back to college to get, the 2-year teaching part of the Spanish certification.
That's what I thought, but thank you for clarifying.
Yes, sir.
Questions? Reverend Collins?
The waiver for the evaluation, what is that exactly?
Yeah, so also what you see a lot of times with schools with high turnover, a lot of schools that are identified in this group, principals identified that due to a high number of new faculty and high turnover, they spend a lot of time in the current evaluation process in South Carolina. For example, the slow process, there's a minimum of 3 meetings per employee that a principal or their team must do, along with pre-conferences and post-conferences and evaluations. So you start having 10, 12 of those every year, and administrators' time can get inundated in meetings and evaluation meetings. So more looking at not the contract, Reverend Collins, but more the process. Is there a way to make it more user-friendly and less cumbersome and all engrossing for administrations at these schools with high turnover?
So does that mean the teachers would not be evaluated?
Oh, yes, sir. We would have to come up with our own instrument to replace, not just completely waive out of the process.
So, Dr. Postwaite, I guess this is for you. It's kind of interesting that we have 15 acceleration schools that we wanted to do creative things with, and before the principals have completed their first round of consideration, the state is telling you certain things that we know have been successful in other schools. They don't want you to ask for en masse. It's a bit concerning to say the State Department of Education asked the Charleston County School District not to consider extended school years for the acceleration schools when so many studies produced by the State Department of Education talk about summer learning loss, and these are underperforming schools. It's also kind of shocking that they would even know we were doing this.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to clarify that what is going on is that there is legislation being considered at least around the school calendar, and it isn't unique to Charleston County. It's just the State Department is recently approved a waiver for one whole district to have a different calendar, and that's creating a lot of problems. So until the legislation gets clarified, rather than asking for that sort of exception for an entire district, for any district in South Carolina, the state board, I think probably more than the State Department, has asked districts not to come forward to ask for an exception to the law about not starting school before the third Monday in August. But we are encouraged to consider innovative practices for schools, particularly those schools that right now in state law, the state superintendent could take over and handle however she wants to.
Because the school start date is not the same thing as an extended school year. The school start date simply means you start your 180-day clock earlier or later. Are we looking at the fact that extended school years have been successful?
Yes, we absolutely are, and that's something that some of our principals are determined to pursue, but we wouldn't ask for a whole-scale waiver of that. There's a different way to pursue that successfully without going through the waiver process. So thank you for the opportunity to make sure that we clarify that.
Just for clarification, the waivers that you're seeking, once you determine what they may be, are you going to present these schools to ask for autonomy to run their school the way that they want, or we're still looking for the particular entities to assist in that?
So this has to do with the waivers that the current principals in those schools have said that they would like to have in order to be able to run their schools more effectively. And we should mention that one of the things they made clear to us was that the district has put some procedures in place that they would also like some waivers from. So this is only about the current principals of those schools asking for waivers that would give them greater autonomy.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Partial magnet recommendations, J.B. Edwards, Jerry Zucker, Mitchell.
Ms. Jeffrey, if you don't mind, can I talk about this one? So this item, we took action on at the November Committee of the Whole. There are a couple of items on our agenda today that were on the November Committee of the Whole that we did not advance to the November board meeting. We wanted to advance them to the December board meeting. That's what the original action was. But it made a heck of a lot more sense to put them on today's agenda so we could have some more discussion. So thank you, Cindy, for pointing that out. So this particular item, the original action was to eliminate the partial magnet status at James B. Edwards, at Zucker Middle School, and at Mitchell, because there were a number of recommendations related to partial magnets that we were making. It did not seem to be the desire of the majority of the board to go in the direction that we were talking about in November. So there are some recommendations on the agenda to make a few partial magnet schools constituent magnets. So I would like to move that we designate James B. Edwards as a D2 constituent magnet, Jerry Zucker Middle School as a D4 constituent magnet, and Mitchell Elementary School as a D20 constituent magnet.
Second.
If anybody has any questions about that.
James B. Edwards, what kind of magnet?
It needs a
James B.
second to
Edwards?
open discussion.
I
Yeah, it's got one.
All three of those schools, James B. Edwards Elementary, Jerry Zucker Middle, and Mitchell Elementary as constituent magnets. So
What is Jamie Edwards now?
it's a partial magnet, so it can serve kids throughout the
So it
district.
has an attendance zone also?
They, all three have attendance zones, yes.
And
So will the attendance zone go away or this
Nope, they are still, a constituent magnet, the definition of a constituent district magnet is the school has a focus or theme. Most constituent magnets have a defined attendance zone. Additional seats are allocated to students living outside the attendance zone, but within the constituent district. So all three of these have an attendance zone, and kids could apply to go from their constituent district. So
based on what you said, then, can the motion be that the original attendance zone will remain in place and the school become a constituent magnet?
I don't think we need to say that because we can't change their attendance. We're not taking any action to change their attendance zone. We're not doing that on any of them. We can if we want
I like to
but-
do it that way because that makes a difference to the students in that community to know that they still can get into that school and they have first priority, if that's their local school.
Okay, so
Is that an amendment?
So I could make the motion to be designate James B. Edwards as
All three,
designate all four of them as constituent magnets, and they will
Maintain their
their-
existing
Thank you.
attendance zone.
Yes.
It can't be changed without notifying the board.
We don't set attendance zones.
Right.
Right, they already
District
set the
board
ones in
did,
place
so
already, yeah.
We can't say
Said
they don't
notifying,
change.
not telling them they can or can't, but you'll find elsewhere in the agenda, there are other words used for other ways for other schools to have other attendance zones. And we don't have consistency throughout this agenda, and it is putting a lot of parents at ill at ease that we won't even know when that process starts.
All right, so you want to say, and they will maintain their current attendance zone, period, or?
Yeah.
The attendance zone can't be
Because
changed.
the search board can come back, they can change anytime. We're not bothering that. The search board can change anytime they want to. We're not changing anything.
Then, if I may,
think
suggest that they maintain their current attendance zone unless future modifications are made by the
Same
constituent
thing.
board.
Absolutely.
I second that.
I would be concerned because there are other places in this agenda where it says the district is going to give the superintendent
Aren't there yet.
We'll address that when we
authority.
get
I know,
there.
but let's clear it up now. We don't have a single constituent board, a single constituent district, school in this district with an attendance zone. This is literally the first vote to create something that does not exist. Ashley River Creative Arts is our only constituent district school, and it currently doesn't have a zone, which we're going to create. So I think it's very important that when you step into new territory for school configurations that don't exist today, that we be very clear in what it is we think we're expecting to see and what the public can expect to see.
All right, so the motion then, it sounds like what you all want to say. Okay, so the sentence about designating them as constituent magnets, and they will maintain their current attendance zone unless future modifications are made by the constituent board.
Yes.
Does that work?
Mr. Hollington.
So,
He's been waiting to speak
go ahead.
himself.
So for clarification, just say, for example, Mitchell Elementary is a traditional elementary school, correct? Right
It's a
now.
partial magnet right now.
No, right now it's a partial
Yeah,
magnet.
it's
And you
partial.
want to change Mitchell to,
A constituent magnet.
Okay.
A constituent magnet.
so those constituents within that district, unless they're zoned for that school, would then apply to go to that school, correct?
Right.
So we'll end up with a one-sided balance again.
No, I don't think so. So any of the kids that are in our other motions that we've made about changing partial magnets, we've said that the students that are there based on being there through the partial magnet process would stay. And so as it relates to Mitchell, kids are zoned for Mitchell. Kids from D20 can apply to go to Mitchell, which they have some of that now. And then kids can also apply to transfer if they're kids from outside the zone who want to transfer. If they're there as a part of the constituent magnet, the district will provide transportation, which we have not always been consistent with in the past. So most of our partial magnets, most of the kids are coming from within the constituent district. There are some places where they're more outside, but most of our, for the most part, like at Zucker, all of those kids that are there on the magnet admission process are zoned for D4.
Did you want to speak, Reverend Mack?
No, the only question I was going to raise, I was going to piggyback on what Cindy mentioned a second ago. Before we cast a vote, and Cindy, you pointed out that there were some other areas that were inconsistent to what we're about to vote on. So what were those other areas of zone that you were referencing?
So
And the only reason I'm asking is because if we cast this vote, then it's already
the
voted.
traditional way that the district has presented to the public that we do attendance zones is based on population, houses, capacity. The Ashley River just simply says create a small one, and it just gives the district the authority to decide what small looks like, and I think we would want to be a little bit more scientific than that. And the proposal for Buse says that at the district's discretion, they can request the constituent board eliminate the Memminger attendance zone. Again, I just feel like we at least need to be informed of these things rather than having the district go and tell a constituent board what to start doing with attendance zones and us be caught on the back end as we have been in some other issues we've learned about magnet schools this year.
Okay. Does that affect what you're about to do
No.
now? Okay, all right.
So I still have a question.
Over here,
Last
another question.
question for me. So you take the school capacity, we know we want to get to the magic number of whatever that school will hold. Let's say this constituent magnet program doesn't get you there. Students outside of the constituent district still have the ability to apply through the transfer policy for the programs and be heard by either the constituent boards receiving them or appealing to this board.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct.
So I have two questions. One, I wanted to clarify that piece. Don't we have a policy that we don't do voluntary transfers for magnets? I can't look at it now, so I'll have to rely on one of you to look it up.
For the countywide magnets.
For the competing ones.
For the
the ones
countywide
competing.
magnets.
So there
we
is
don't.
no policy that people can't request a voluntary transfer to a magnet school?
To a constituent magnet, if there's space available, I mean, they can apply, I guess they could request whatever. I don't think it would be approved unless there was space available.
So I just wanted to make sure, because it seems to me we have a policy we operate under that we don't take those in our transfer processes. So I really think we need to get that kind of clarified before we move any further.
That's only for the schools that would be compete to get in. That's all, that's for none of the other schools.
I mean,
Only they compete
okay,
to
so
get in.
there's no policy on the books that says they can't request a transfer into a magnet school.
Not a regular magnet school, this has everybody.
I am not, these magnet schools don't exist. Again, there is no transfers into Ashley River Creative Arts, so we're kind of creating our history as we go here. I just want to make sure there's no policy on the books. Has anyone looked at our transfer policies and
Yes,
confirmed that?
I can dance the transfer policy up now. Yes, I did love it.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So the board decided to eliminate the partial magnet status of these schools on November 11th. What changed from, I just want to know what changed from November 11th to the 16th. What I heard you say was it didn't appear that the will of the board was to go in this direction. This did receive the will of the board.
It was the first thing that we voted on. There were a number of other action items that we had for partial magnets that it seemed, in my estimation, that the will of the board was to move the partial magnets to constituent magnets and not to eliminate any partial magnets that could be constituent magnets.
Okay. If there are no more questions, there's a vote.
Kevin, Ms. Rowland says are you voting? Got it? Okay, good. Thanks.
That passed. Partial magnet recommendations, Hot Gap.
So this is a similar item. I mean, this item, actually, we didn't make any changes. I'm not recommending any changes from the original motion. So basically, the recommended action is that effective for the 2020, and I'll make this motion, 2021 school year, Hot Gap will serve as an advanced studies constituent magnet open to all eligible D9 and D3 students. Eligible D9 students receive seating priority. So this is the language that we voted on November 11th.
Second.
So why is it on this agenda?
Because it wasn't a majority. We didn't, I mean, it wasn't a unanimous, sorry. some people voted against it.
Right, it wasn't
I think
unanimous,
that
but it passed.
It passed, but it wasn't unanimous, so it has to be on the on the agenda.
Okay.
And there was a second?
I'd second it.
Okay.
May I
Yeah.
ask a question? So how many seats will that realistically give D3? I mean, if we create this, have we done the numbers on that? And if it is the constituent magnet school, will there still be attendance zone kids in the zone for Hot Gap that will not be able to access the magnet program because you have not eliminated the pre-entrance requirements for Hot Gap's magnet program?
No, well, Mr. Barowie can tell us what the numbers are. The program at Hot Gap will be similar to, any student who is at Hot Gap can apply to be in the advanced studies. It'll be like honors programs at other middle schools. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So it will require so there will be students attending Hot Gap who will not qualify for the magnet program. It will be their attendance zone school, and they won't, and they can apply to be in the magnet program, but they can be disqualified from it.
Well, they wouldn't, I think what will end up happening is that they can do, they may be able to participate in whatever classes. So let's say they're somebody who's really strong in English and social studies, they can take the honors English and social studies part, but they might take, I mean, Mr. Williams, Dr. Williams.
The goal would be to have that advanced studies magnet, and you are correct in saying that there would be criteria for them to be a part of that, but we'll also have an honors program as well for those kids that may not reach that level of being in the advanced studies magnet.
So there will be students that live in the Hot Gap zone that go to Hot Gap. Some of them will and some of them will not be allowed to be in the magnet program based on the admissions criteria that is in place.
Yes, ma'am.
The kids that are transferring from James Island, can they transfer into the regular Hot Gap program, or are they required to meet the academic magnet concept in order to go to Hot Gap?
They would have to meet that criteria. Any kid that wanted to apply would have to meet that criteria.
So, and by the way, the number of extra seats beyond potential is about 72.
Right, and I think the change that we're looking at is that it's all one school, just like Lang is all one school, or Zucker's all one school, separating the kids out. But is that, the seats are 70, something, 72?
There'll be about 7% of the kids living on James Island when these motions all pass that will be able to access a magnet school.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yep.
Oh, I guess. That passed. F.
I'm sorry.
Right.
Sullivan's Island. So this is similar to the James B. Edwards, Zucker, Mitchell item. At the November 11th, we made a motion to make no changes to the status of Sullivan's Island to remove consideration. I'd like to propose that we designate Sullivan's Island as a D2 constituent magnet. That will enable kids from the D2 area to apply for the constituent magnet program, continue to provide transportation. We won't have any kids who are in the program now, they can just age out, and then if there's seats open, kids can apply for a transfer, right? One of the main reasons to make these suggestions about constituent magnets is now with the partial magnet program, we've got kids, we're busing all throughout the district to the different partial magnets, and so this would make this school a constituent magnet, which is consistent with what we're doing with the other partial magnets.
Couple of questions.
Yeah, so the motion is to designate Sullivan's Island as a constituent magnet. Do you want to put that same wording in about they'll maintain their current attendance zone unless future modifications are made by the constituent boards?
Yes, but I have a question too.
I'll second the motion for discussion purposes.
Okay, go ahead, Reverend Collins.
The kids at Sullivan's Island now, those are the kids, is it zoned for Sullivan's Island and Isle of Palm kids, or just Sullivan's Island?
Sullivan's Island and Isle of Palms
Both are zoned in.
are zoned for Sullivan's Island, yes.
And that gives us about how many kids roughly are in the
About
school?
300 kids who go there that are zoned for there, and then there are about 200 kids that are there on the partial magnet program.
And where the 200 kids coming from roughly?
Most of those kids are coming from D2. There's a few that come from outside of D2, but not a whole lot.
Mhm. All right, so also Sullivan's Island. we maintain the attendance zone and grant magnet status to District 2.
Right,
All right.
just like the others. So it'll be, so it's designate Sullivan's Island as a D2 constituent magnet, and they will maintain their current attendance zone unless future modifications are made by the constituent boards.
But does Sullivan's Island have like any type of magnet program that?
Yeah, they do. Each one of these that we talk about, they all
They have
all
extra
have a
points, yeah.
program.
Keep that.
What's one of the programs I have?
I'm sorry?
What's one of the programs I have?
Theirs is a,
Ocean study.
ocean studies, sea life, you know, because they're right, environmental, thank you.
Okay.
They're,
Thank you.
because they're right there on the water.
Okay.
Ms. Coates?
So we began this conversation about partial magnets and magnet schools when we created a board goal to create equity and access through revamped magnet and choice options. But all these votes are doing is eliminating access for certain students. It's one thing to say we're going to alter magnet schools so that we can normalize offerings in our schools, but it's another thing to say we are going to continue operating magnet schools, but change it so that only certain children who live in the areas can go. And I think that this is no one's intention, but that would give, you know, as I said, James Island has like a 7% chance of getting into one magnet option with extra teacher points and services. North Charleston, at the net result of these is that 10.2% of the children will be able to access a school that has extra funding and specialized programs, and 34% of Mount Pleasant kids will be able to access one because they have 5 programs to most of these constituent areas having one. So I understand the need, but as I said in September, we're doing this backwards. We're eliminating people's ability to go to these things while publicly saying we will continue to operate the magnet, and I just find that that is not what we said we wanted to do when we started this process.
Other comments?
With all due respect, I mean, if you look at the population of Mount Pleasant as
Is
it relates
smaller
to-
than North Charleston's.
I understand.
Finish.
But they represent about 30% of the students in the district, and that's what they've got.
We represent 29%.
I understand the
You
difference.
please let him finish, thank you.
So we are attacking this from a bunch of different ways. One, we're trying to eliminate people driving all over the county. We're trying to improve all of the schools in every district as a part of that so that they don't need to go all over the county. So it's not one thing we can do here to fix this. We have to fix about 10 things, which I think is the effort. We may not get it right, as one speaker said, but I think if people will lean in and try and work to make all of these things better, it will accomplish the objective we're after. We may disagree, which is fine, but that's my viewpoint on the matter.
And I do agree, we're trying to accomplish this. And I said this in September, I think your prioritization's wrong. We have literal to-do list on this agenda of how to fix and improve and expand magnet schools, and we don't have a single word in any of these things from November or today other than an early learning childhood center for about 95 kids for 2 schools that is already serving 3- and 4-year-olds in North Charleston. I agree we should, and I agree y'all want to. I just know that there's no plan to make that happen being put before us.
There's been more than that because we've talked about gifted and talented programs in every middle school, and we've talked about other things. But again, we could talk about that offline.
Okay, any other comments? Mr. Hollington?
Okay, so you're going to bus children into Sullivan's Island?
We're busing children into Sullivan's Island right now. We bus about 200 kids into Sullivan's Island right now.
Okay.
There's only 300, the school's built for 500, and they're in the zone, there are only about 300 kids.
Okay.
We have to call the
There's a
question.
vote before us. Is there any more, are there any more questions?
Yes.
Chris.
Yes, sir.
And that passed. Partial magnet recommendations, St. Andrews Math and Science.
So this is very similar to the Sullivan's Island motion. We, at the November 11th meeting, we pulled it and said not to take any motion, but we want to be consistent with what we're doing. So I would move that we designate St. Andrews School of Math and Science as a D10 constituent magnet. They will continue to maintain their current attendance zone unless future modifications are made by the constituent board.
Second.
I have one question. So how will this work with the pre-admissions testing for these students? If you create the attendance zone, will they be into the magnet program or just be into the traditional program? And the magnet program is, again, only available to the kids who meet the attendance testing for St. Andrews Math and Science.
Do you want to address that? But my understanding is that, go ahead. My understanding is, I mean, that in all of our programs, we're trying, well, in this program, that the kids who are there, the attendance zone kids, they all take advantage of the magnet program. It's not like only certain kids are getting.
Well, it has no attendance zone, so you can't attend St. Andrews Magnet unless you pass the test. If you create an attendance zone.
It has an attendance zone.
It does.
It has an attendance zone, yes. It has an attendance zone.
And do those students have to pass this test to get in, or just the kids applying?
Just the kids applying.
How is, I would like to make an amendment to this, that we at least normalize how the children access the schools. I mean, if you live there and you don't have to take the admissions test, and I'm looking at a rubric that's as big as Academic Magnets rubric, why would we make the other kids take that test? Now, I mean, I'm asking the board because y'all are the ones creating the agenda and the emotions. We could eliminate that by adding that to this motion today.
We can deal with that in another motion. That's a different topic, I think. But it's a valid point, though.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to put it in this motion.
Because that's something that we haven't voted on during our time on the board.
Well, this is the committee meeting. This is where you introduce these motions.
No, understood. Yeah, but I'm just saying that what you're pointing out is something that hasn't been brought forward before.
So do we need to
Neither
have
has
the
turning
committee
this
to
into
bring it back?
No, this is her idea of the
Why can't,
testing.
what if I do think that's something that we ought to look at, but I think we need to put some thought into it. Could we not bring that back for our January board meeting, so we could take quick action on it? And to make sure that there's not any other admission criteria that we're not aware of for any of those.
I really think you just gave the best argument for us having these conversations at another time, because we have found out that Bust is not testing all of the applicants. We have a sibling policy that we have found out doesn't put siblings in certain schools. It puts them on a different waiting list. We have a rubric to get into St. Andrews Math and Science that I don't think anybody realized that's unbelievable. Maybe we need to know these things before we start deciding these exact motions are the solution.
Well, I think that I would be comfortable with us taking action on this item and then bringing back for the January.
You can't bring back a change to the magnet school admissions in January per
It's too
policy.
Soon. It's too soon anyway. They'll meet with the school. Maybe February, March. They'll meet with the school first, yeah.
I mean, no, the policy says if we're going to make that decision about how, because remember, this is also one of the schools that automatically gets into C.E. Williams without having to go through the magnet process.
Well,
So we're creating these pipelines.
Yeah, but we're just going to have one West Ashley Middle School. So
But we can't change the admissions process in January.
All right, then I would say to leave my motion as it is.
Yeah, I think so.
Second.
But we do want to have staff to look at all those admissions criteria.
Yes, we
and
Not just
and-
here, everywhere.
Yeah, for all of the schools,
there's-
and come back with
Yeah.
a recommendation, and as long as we can
That'll
make it happen before the school year, that's what
No,
we
we have
would
a
like to
policy that
see.
says if we don't make it happen now, it doesn't happen for the next school year.
We need to look at all of it, I agree. But we don't have to take action.
Okay. There's a vote, unless there's another comment.
No.
And it passed. Partial magnet recommendations, Memminger.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the motion as written there. The one, for people sitting out front, the one change regarding phase-in is part of the Bust motion, not this one, so.
Second.
Can you explain that, Mr. Garrett?
Explain this motion a little bit.
With the this is the phase-in is with, so next year's, this is not part of this motion, it'll be part of the Bust because it relates to there. that the kindergarten advanced program would begin at Memminger next year, grade up first, second in the years following, and in the years following at Buste, kindergarten, then first, then second would no longer be a part of the Buste building.
To keep the same attendance zone with the. and
It
become
keeps the
magnet.
same attendance zone, yes.
Oh, doesn't it, does your motion address attendance zone in here?
No, it's countywide, it says.
Well, it's countywide, but the attendance zone, this,
Will remain.
the, says, well, you've got it in front of you.
Yeah, but so, we just need to add the language that the attendance zone will remain unless the Constitution Board overturns it.
Actually, the
changes it.
motion,
In there,
the
I
motion
don't see
is
it.
to phase out the attendance zone. That's in the motion that
But
Todd
that needs
just
to come out
made.
then.
So what it says about the attendance zone is work with the constituent board to phase out the attendance zone if necessary over time. So it leaves that open.
But, wait a minute, I don't think I like that language there. Work with Constitution Board to phase out attendance zone if necessary over time. That doesn't tell us anything really. Let's just do what we did already. The same thing.
Mr. Hollenshed?
Would changing the status cause Memminger to lose its Title I status?
Not if it keeps its attendance zone, it shouldn't. It shouldn't, if it keeps its attendance zone, it shouldn't lose it.
But it's changing the variation of people there, though.
But from outside the attendance zone, then the others can come in. But if that becomes a majority, then it could
Depends
potentially
on the
lose it.
number of seats they
It could
plan to
lose it.
set
I don't know the complicated
Can-
Memminger.
Can we ask the superintendent to answer Mr. Hollingshead's question?
I would think that
Cindy,
Todd could answer.
let Dr. Post would answer, please.
So anytime you change the student enrollment in a school, Title I status could change. It shouldn't change immediately, but over time it could change. None of us has a crystal ball. So it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. It would be a good thing if none of our schools had a population of a socioeconomic distribution that was skewed to the point that we need the federal dollars. However, setting the percentage eligibility for Title I schools is something the district has some control over. So we decide where to set that cut on distributing our Title I funds. The fact that we have impoverished children in our district doesn't keep us from getting federal money. Where we set the cut zone for the distribution of those funds is something over which the district has some control.
But it would eventually phase those children out of that school.
It could. I'm not saying that it would, but it could. It depends on the students who attend in the attendance zone and the numbers of students who are phasing in K, 1, and 2, and the numbers of students who stay there for grades 3, 4, and 5. So the most honest answer is it could. It definitely shouldn't change it for this coming year.
So the Title I is 70% free and reduced lunch, right?
I believe,
That's where we've got it set.
More like 80% Reverend Collins at Memminger as it stands today.
It's 80% now?
The population at Memminger has about an 80% poverty index today.
Okay, so what I'm asking though, but our guideline has got to be at least 70%. You consider to get free and reduced lunch, right?
Right.
Get federal dollars. Can that be reduced lower?
we have the right to adjust it where we want it. Michelle English Watson has worked this for years and can speak to it in more detail if you want, but the district can change that
Well, good, that's good to know.
qualifier up or down. The reason we don't want to set it too low is it dilutes the money and it goes to too many schools, so it can't have an impact where we need it to have an
I
impact.
understand. So, but for Kevin's concern, if we got to be 20 students, not enough to make it free and reduced lunches, so we can adjust those numbers in advance or after the fact, can we do it still?
Right, that doesn't have to do with free and reduced lunch. Now, that has to do with
Federal dollars,
the
yeah.
Title I monies that come to
I
help
just use that for example, but,
And you're right, that's the language we used to use.
yeah.
But that just kind of makes, just listening to y'all, it just becomes more of a feeder pattern just for abuse, more than anything else, instead of it serving the children that it needs to serve. If it eventually phases it out.
I don't think that that's the intent, because let's assume that you're right, that some students go to Memminger and then transfer to Butte. It still leaves as we're looking at it today, it leaves grades 3, 4, and 5 at Meminger. So it's not the intent, as far as I know, to phase Meminger out. But I'm saying that could happen over time. I don't see that in this proposal. And I don't see how the balance of kindergarten children next year could possibly tip that school into a non-Title I status. Do you? Ms.
No, no.
Do you have a comment?
It could happen over time.
A couple of comments. Several comments, and I'd like to ask Mr. Garrett to consider something as a friendly modification. If we're going to have advanced studies at Meminger, it shouldn't stop at second grade. I don't know that we need to put that in this motion, but I'd like to consider that if we're going to raise the academic achievement there, we need to continue to offer challenging rigor for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. Secondly, because this has been such a flashpoint, but this applies really to all of the other schools, I hope that as we think about implementing any of these changes, we're engaging, as was requested by Mr. Washington very eloquently, engaging our school improvement councils in the community that have shown up with such passion to help be part of the solution, because none of this is going to work if they're not working with us. And then finally, Mr. Garrett, I think Reverend Collins made a fair point that your third sentence, which currently says work with the constituent board to phase out the attendance zone if necessary, and in order to be consistent with the motions that have preceded it, I would suggest that the attendance zone remain in place unless the constituent board makes a change in the future, as we have done in other motions.
Okay.
I'd hope you'd accept that.
I agree with that.
Yeah, to delete that.
With
It'll be the same
just for
language you
those
use.
who are looking at the motion, if you've got it in front of you, it said the second sentence in the motion will be deleted. then.
And replaced with the language.
Correction, third sentence, I missed a period.
Will it be replaced with the same language, Todd, as the other magnet proposals?
Yes.
That's the proposal.
That's my recommendation, is all of our preceding
Language
motions.
is,
Attendance zone will remain in place unless future changes are made by the constituent board.
Okay.
That'd be consistent with what we've said
Who's
before.
doing it back over here, Todd? She's got it.
Julie, did you get that sentence?
I'm working on it.
Okay.
Reverend Collins?
Okay, so I think, so now the hard part is this, the kids at Meminger to matriculate to Buse automatically if they meet eligibility criteria, which will be established by the start of the 2020 school year. I think that's the can of worms part that we're diving into. I don't know how, well, put it this way, shouldn't that be established now? If you have that process that if a child goes to Meminger, then he's expected to enter into abuse at some point in the future. But it tells me that either that child has to be prepared by the school district to go into abuse, be academically prepared, or able to pass a test. But if he's not able to enter into abuse, then where will that child go? Would it stay at Meminger, or would it go somewhere else, or what happens?
They could stay at Meminger?
Let Postlewaite tell me, please, if you don't mind.
Postlewaite?
Yeah, Dr. Postlewaite, yes.
As I understand this motion, there are two important points in response to your question. The first is that, as Mr. Frazier has suggested, the advanced academic program at Meminger needs to continue through the 5th grade. So at the end of 2nd grade, if a Meminger student did not qualify to enter 3rd grade at Buse, the student, an option for the student would be to stay at Meminger as part of that academic program at Meminger. The reason the entrance criteria at Buse aren't established yet is that we don't have 3rd grade entrance criteria for Buse right now. We only have kindergarten entrance criteria. And then there's a long waiting list created, and if a vacancy occurs somewhere down the road, as you know, students are pulled from that waiting list. So we have to figure out what the 3rd grade entrance criteria for all of Buse should be in the future. The state identifies what the state considers to be gifted, academically gifted children through a process at the end of 2nd grade. this change would give us some time to develop those criteria, talking with experts involving teachers, getting input from parents about what the eligibility criteria should look like, and you won't need them for a couple of years, but we were thinking, when we were asked about this, our response was if we could have till summertime to get those established, then before children start school in kindergarten, their parents would know what the eligibility criteria would be by the end of second grade, not only for Memiger's kindergarten children, but for children throughout the district.
So one more question on the same thing, if you don't mind. So then, would it be feasible to vote on the first part today and the vote on the second part when it's more developed? Maybe it's a separate motion, maybe, or give you time to meet with the constituents and the parents and go through the vetting process.
Just tell me what you consider to be the second part.
The kids will students will automatically matriculate. I'm sorry, students will matriculate to Buse automatically if they meet the eligibility criteria, and then the eligibility criteria part from their own is what I'm wondering. I'm just wondering if we're prepared for that or not. I'm not sure we are, but you understand it better than I do.
The Buse motion addresses some of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've heard a lot from parents that there's a lot of unknown out there, and so as much as we can have known for people, I'd be more comfortable approving the motion as it is with the change with that third sentence taking out with the attendance zone, and then the IB magnet with the K-5 advanced academic mode. Those are the changes that we've talked about so far. I had.
Yes. She had her hand up first.
Just real quickly, and I don't think we need to include this in the motion, but I think I would assume staff's going to do it, but if not, I would hope we would all agree that we need some kind of a transition committee for both Meminger and Buse, depending on what motion we take on that. I know right now we have a team that's working on the West Ashley Middle School merger, but I think, a team with SIC representation, parents, teachers, facilitated by Michelle or led by something like that, I think would be important to have. So I think if y'all are already working on that.
Yes, ma'am, as fast as we get our marching orders,
Yes.
as fast as we know what the will of the board is. The intention is before the end of this week to begin to form a small group working session to make this work come to fruition.
Perfect, okay, thanks.
Mr. Hollington?
Mr. Garrett, in your proposal, y'all are looking to rename the school also?
Potentially. I mean, we don't, the motion doesn't rename it, it just says there's a committee.
So let me finish this and then you can have it. So what that programs like the College of Charleston that are currently serving that school, then they would lose that then?
No.
No?
The K through 2 configuration was limited to explicitly to ensure that remains there. There's space for that to remain there.
What would purpose of the renaming be?
If you've got a new program being added to there, if the, in the future, the district decides or the committee sets up and decides they want to, they would that would be moving forward if they wanted to.
And the other thing is, why y'all got the air conditioner on in the wintertime?
Feels good.
Feels good.
He's called you people who
Drink
I know
some
is
water.
cold. May I now?
Yes.
So I think what we need to understand here is this is what will happen, and it's not that it's good or it's bad will happen. It's going to happen because there are 450 seats at Meminger. That is from a report Mr. Barowie gave us 2 years ago when we first began talking about expanding Buse. The attendance zone for Meminger has 325 seats. So you will have 125 children from downtown Charleston getting first priority, with 125 seats with a D20 priority. There are 2,987 kids K through 5 that live in D20. So I think it becomes very quick to realize there's not going to be a lot of people outside of D20 accessing Meminger just because of the capacity and the number of people that live there. by having students matriculate to Buste automatically if they meet the criteria means they don't have to apply for the magnet seats, they will get in. So that lack of space for any other students is going to grow through Buste. I'm not saying that's wrong or right, I'm just saying that needs to be clearly understood, that that's what these numbers will do. And I kind of agree with Mr. Hollenshed. We have a policy that says if somebody decides they want to rename a school, they can convene a naming committee. There's a reason y'all wanted that language in there, and it's not because you think that they're afraid they might forget there's a policy that allows them to rename schools. So I think we need to know, was your consideration including Memminger not being named Memminger? I mean, this is not saying you can now.
Yes, that's a possibility.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, with that language, that is a possibility.
And so with the 325 kids zoned for Memminger and the 125 seats remaining, are we again saying that if you live there, you still have to test to access the academically advanced program?
Read the motion.
Yeah. Call
the
the
question.
question.
The public needs to know.
Well,
Yes. Yes. You know- well, I'm saying you know the answer to the question.
No, I wasn't
Yeah.
sure because I hadn't
Yeah.
seen that. Okay.
Call the question.
Wait a minute, please.
Nope, I called the
This
question.
is important.
Question's
This is
been
Got to
important.
vote on the call to the question.
Please, this is very important. Let me declare. Well, can we vote on that, then call the question?
No, when you call the question, you call the question.
If-
You got a majority vote to do that, though.
He made it very clear that we had 10 minutes.
And the
to talk
chair,
about these
the
things.
chair is the only
Well,
one that has the authority to take a
Mr.
vote for
Chair,
that, right,
can I-
Mr.
can I bring up one
Parliamentarian?
more point, Mr. Chair?
What you doing?
Todd is committee whole chair.
Oh, yeah. All right.
It's
So we
really-
will take a vote on calling the question. A majority
I just have one,
will
really just
stop.
one thing to bring out.
Going around the horn, Mr. Hollenshed, what is your vote on?
Motion on calling the question.
We're extending the debate time. is really-
Then it's debate time.
Name.
All right, Cindy, Mrs. Coates?
So my yes vote means I agree with calling the question?
Yes.
Okay.
You vote yes?
Yes, I
Okay.
do.
Mr. Reverend Collins?
So we plan to back up, then she's voting yes, Kevin's voting yes. They're voting different things.
You said nay, correct?
He did.
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. All right, I vote yay. Mr. Collins, Reverend Collins?
So no voters get more time.
Correct.
I vote no then.
Okay, Reverend Mack?
Yes.
Ms. Darby?
Yes.
Ms. Jeffrey?
Yes.
Ms. Green?
Yes.
All right, and then Mr. Frazier?
Aye.
All right, it passes, and if you will please cast your vote.
This motion needs more work, and we have to address it at some point again. It's going to create a lot of chaos. I can see that already.
Next item up, Ms. Jeffrey,
Call the vote.
excuse me.
I don't see the vote yet.
I voted. I think I voted.
Are we waiting on somebody to vote?
Wait on somebody to vote.
No, it's not showing. Can you just tell us what it is, Julie?
It's showing them here.
Yay, 3 nay.
Okay, the motion passed, and now we're on to Buste Academy.
Can we take a quick, yeah, well, hold on. Can you just
Scroll down.
tell us? She can't scroll down.
It was 6.
Wait, let Julie read.
Okay.
Julie, can you read what the votes were, please?
6 yay, and then 3 nays, Collins, Coates, and Hollenshed.
Okay, so the motion passes. Can we take a 5-minute bathroom
Yep.
break?
Can we do it after the last one?
All right, let's go through this one. All right, sorry. Okay.
All right, the next item up, the motion, I would request that the first sentence be deleted so that it would phase out, it would follow the first bullet of the November 11th meeting. So that the language, the first sentence of this motion would then read, phasing out kindergarten, first grade, second grade at Buste Elementary by year 23-24, except no new students in these grades at Buste, and begin the phasing in academic program at Memminger.
Okay, can you just, do you mind just reading the whole motion so Julie can get it and people in the audience can hear it?
That's the only sentence change.
So read the whole
What's the whole motion then?
Motion change Buste entrance criteria and school configuration with the first line, Julie, being phasing out kindergarten, first grade, and second grade at Buste Elementary by the year 23-24, except no new students in these grades at Buste, and begin phasing in a K-2 advanced program at Memminger.
So,
Second.
Sorry, hold on. Todd, for
Yes.
clarification. So that motion, but then
The other remains.
the other part of the motion you and I submitted remains, right?
Correct.
Okay, so can we just read, because people out there don't.
Oh,
have
got it.
Right, the whole motion.
It says, so the next line, just going through there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullet points. Going through, the next one is expands grades 3, 4, 5, and 6 by 1 class per grade. Priority will be given to students scoring at the 75th percentile or higher on math, reading and math, who are zoned for an elementary school in Charleston County with a poverty index equal to or greater than 80%. With the next line is develop prior to the start of 2021 school year, new admissions criteria for third graders and above who are transferring in from outside Memminger in 2021-22, keeping the current level of academic standards. Next line, by 24-25, expand the middle enrollment to 4 classes per grade. Review countywide academic magnet data and entrance criteria annually in order to ensure changes are producing results consistent with the board goals of quality and fair representation of student populations. All applicants from throughout the district will be screened to determine eligibility. So on that last point, just as a clarification, I had a question from somebody over the weekend saying, well, you're saying math. Well, so, some private schools don't do math. Is this somehow eliminating private schoolers? And I got clarification over the weekend from the district that we would either take take the equivalency from SC Ready or administer MAP to students ourselves. So the district would narrow that out, but the intent is.
It's not to exclude.
Yeah, it's not to exclude people from applying for
Reverend
it
Collins?
because of MAP. Yeah.
Sorry.
Second.
Oh, I seconded it.
Yep, we're still on that.
Reverend Collins?
Yeah, the first line that Mr. Todd got read, the change to the interest criteria for abuse doesn't really tell us anything. I mean, what is the change? What's the requirement? I mean, I don't know how we vote on something that we don't know what it is. You read the change, the information requirement. Read the first sentence again.
Yeah, understood with is looking at, and maybe that's wording that is
in the beginning,
a duplication that may not need to be there. For 2021, give priority to students scoring at 75th percentile or higher on MAP, which is the current transfer in requirement. If you're on a waiting list and you've got 75th percentile on your MAP scores, both reading and MAP, you get to come in. If you don't, then even though your number gets pulled, you don't get in. So that would remain the same. And that, the language, but then, prior to next year, the district would have the option.
Come back to us. So
yeah.
So that entrance, for next year, the third grade entrance criteria would be what it is right now.
Correct.
What it was this past fall, but staff will come back to us prior to the start of the 2021 school year with new admission criteria for third graders and above.
And I guess the real change, Reverend Collins, is in that we talked about with the 4-year-olds, it going to ready, not ready versus the previous testing that had been administered.
So just let me say this then. Understand, I'm speaking from the perspective that I've seen a lot of motions over the years, and the motion we just voted on a little while ago, as well as one we're about to vote on now, these motions have to have drastic and contradicting changes that impact the community quite a bit. Normally, you wouldn't put this much change in one motion and vote all at one time, because each thing has to be carefully and thoroughly vetted. I don't know how much work you've done to vet each item, but it's a lot of changes. The voting that we're voting in 5 minutes time and I think we've done a good job, but we don't understand the impact of the community. I really think it needs work. I really recommend pulling it and pulling it back and vet it again. Maybe try again next meeting or in February. But it's a lot of conflicting changes.
Ms. Coates?
So, Todd,
for it doesn't say for 2021, it says for 2021 only, give priority to students scoring at that percentile. How are you handling we already know there's a severe lack of space for children outside of D20, because we just talked about how Memminger is going to flow almost 100% D20 students. So this is the one shot outside students will be taking. How are we going to handle the sibling policy? Do they get in before the Memminger, or do they not get in for sibling policy because of the lack of space?
It doesn't affect the sibling policy, but there's not a separate list for
There is
siblings.
abused.
There is today, yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
So will they be allowed in before the Memminger matriculation or after?
It does not, it would be after the Memminger matriculation.
Okay.
Yep.
And can we, I know that Kate, that was exactly what I wanted to see in the motion, was that the board would at least be aware of the entrance criteria as being created, but y'all didn't put that in the motion. And I wondered why y'all were very detailed and y'all didn't put in there that it just says there'll be a criteria created. It never says the board's going to be allowed to see it, hear about it, know about it, or whatever. And y'all were very specific in all of your other expectations.
With that, I mean,
We can add to
yeah,
that.
that can
Thank
be,
you.
that
I
can
would
be added to
appreciate that.
become,
And can we, and I would
to come
ask,
back to the board for approval. The intent
even
is
for
not to.
information,
Yep.
even
okay.
if it's just, my thing is that we just need, I mean, even if that's a Friday update, I'm not saying we need to approve everything, but these things we don't need to find out about unless we're finding out about it from the district. And I would ask for a friendly amendment that the students matriculating from Memminger and the students matriculating from any other elementary school have the same admissions test for third grade entrance.
Ms. Darby?
Can
I
we
mean,
put that, can we put?
That would have been in the previous motion. I'm just trying to remember.
That's exactly it. It says in neither of these motions do you clearly state that there's not going to be another two-tiered system.
Oh, correct.
One test for these, one test for those. So can we get clear with that by making
Yeah.
a friendly amendment into this motion that the admissions test will be consistent from all elementary schools?
Yes. So Julie, if you look, are you looking at the motion? Just with respect to bullet point number 3, it says develop prior to 2021 school year new admissions criteria.
But didn't we just ask for that for all of the schools?
Yeah, that's what we're working on.
Right.
Well, while you're at it, if I may.
Yes.
It should end after the word third graders, because the Memminger 2021 transferring in from outside Memminger, it's irrelevant because you don't have the transfer in. So
Right.
the
Okay.
balance
Got
of that
it.
sentence should come out.
Okay.
All right, so Todd, what are you proposing?
What's your language, Cindy?
That the entrance exam into Buist is the same for children matriculating from every elementary school into the third grade. Memminger kids, North Charleston Elementary School kids, the test into Buist is the same.
Right, and it will, in this coming year, it will be 75th percentile as MAP, which is no change.
Right, and where it says new admission criteria for
priority.
third graders, right, the priority, but I want to make sure they have the same admissions criteria.
Correct, yeah, it's not in,
have it in MAP.
again, with the 4-year-old, the test change is intentional because in the upper grades in this fall, you had 30% who would not have
Right, same thing
met
at
that
Sam's,
MAP
but we didn't
requirement to
remove
get
it from
in.
Sam's.
So the 4-year-old test that we have been using is not a good predictor. In the upper grades, it has been 75th percentile. The intent is to keep that.
Right, I just want to make sure our
irrespective of where
intent
you're
is to
coming
be
in from.
bingo.
Okay. Julie, could you read the motion as written?
She's
once you've
typing
got
right
it done?
now. While she's typing that, can I was next, Priscilla?
Yes.
So a couple of quick things. One, we're talking about this, how many kids coming from Memminger. Right now, I think we have about 350 kids at Memminger, space for 460, so we've got potentially a space for 110 kids. We have talked a lot about the excess capacity at our schools on the peninsula, so I don't think, it would be a nice problem to have if we are jam-packed at Memminger. That would be great. And I just want to make sure we'll have a transition committee as well. I think you're already working on that,
Yes, ma'am.
right?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Question.
Okay.
How How will this increase diversity within that school?
The district intentionally is going to reach out. There are kids at Mitchell, Sanders Clyde, at across the district who are sitting in programs in which they might be one of a handful of kids who are qualified to go in. The intent, and particularly as you see in that motion with the priority for the initial third grade expansion is to reach out to kids who are zoned for an elementary school with a poverty index equal to or greater to 80%. Then all taxpayers are treated equally within those districts, but the intent is to target those schools at which there is not an opportunity for kids who are of that caliber of achievement in their grade level. If you are driving, so we have excellent opportunities in many places across the district that often do a better job if you look at the scores and break it out at growth and achievement by their students. Even Buse does a wonderful job, but there are excellent opportunities in other areas that are not 80% or poverty or better.
So really it's speculative, but what happened if the parents are not comfortable sending their children to Buse and not wanting to be accepted to that? But and if that's the case, then all you're really doing is creating more of the same, just like you did with the kindergarten program, expanding it, and then it didn't create any diversity whatsoever. So I'm just curious.
In the kindergarten program, it just the ones in the additional.
I'll go with none, but anyway.
Areas
They actually live in your
Yeah.
neighborhood.
So, and it's just one, but you
Still
still,
want diversity.
yeah, doesn't mean it's diversity.
Not diversity, not one.
But y'all are taking in account that some parents may not be comfortable in that setting, and they want their own community schools to remodel that, which allows their child to feel comfortable and excel within their neighborhood. So I'm just, again.
We're trying to do that too.
I'm almost done. If we go about these changes and then later on we find out it doesn't have the impact that you want, I'm just curious, that's all, and I'm done.
Thank you.
Just for a clarifying question, are there any
Ms. Coates
schools?
had made the comment that she was concerned about D20 students sort of overwhelming the school. If in fact we execute on this so well that everybody in D20 comes back to public schools, that's not a bad thing. They pay taxes and should go here.
I agree.
I don't think the academic admission folks at our private schools are looking for jobs. I think we've got some room to go here. So I think it's our job to go out in all of these schools, not just this school, every school, and create opportunity, and that's what all of these motions are building upon. So with that in mind, I'd like to call the question as modified.
Okay.
Do you want
Are
Julie to
there any
read it?
schools in downtown D20 that are not 80% poverty schools?
No, ma'am.
So by definition, this covers every school in North Charleston and downtown.
Do you all want Julie to read the motion again, or are you comfortable with the?
Ms. Boncoats, Ms. Boncoats, James Simmons would be the only school
about to
that
say,
didn't
yeah.
qualify for that 80% threshold.
Thank you.
Okay, you ready to vote?
Yeah. Ms. Darby, you had mentioned
Question's been called.
K through 5.
Yes.
That was not part of a modified portion of the motion, so the motion still reads K through 2.
Are you good?
Although the intention is to expand it to K through 5, and I think staff and everyone
Are
understands
you
that.
good to make it?
I think we're just going to have to trust that we've come down this far. The district will go ahead and make it a K-5.
Thank you.
Check the wording, if
Okay.
you would, on the modification to the third grade to make sure we got it right. I think Julie and I got it, but I may not. It's wordy.
Doesn't say anything about consistent.
It's down in there.
Review county, where?
It's about 60% of the way through it.
Develop prior.
To the start of the 2021 school year, new admissions criteria for third graders. Okay, I see what you're saying. So what they did was they took out the
Right.
the matriculation
Right.
students. Okay.
Thank you, Captain.
Okay, but today be used as a countywide magnet?
It's a countywide magnet, it stays a countywide magnet.
Well, and not in theory, but not in practicality.
Well, you don't know yet, we don't know yet.
I mean, if District 20
It
becomes.
does have a priority for District 20 that's
District 20 becomes the
unlimited.
priority, for the kids to get into the school.
That's already there.
Yeah, it's already there, that's there now. They have 45% of the students now. So,
But the populace changed quite a bit the last couple of years. That's gonna be gone in
for
a second.
this year, they have that.
Next year, we don't know.
The question's been called, so.
We're just discussing that
Yeah.
for clarity.
But it is still a countywide magnet. Can you read it? I can't see the, can you tell us what it was?
6-3, Collins, Coates, and Hollingshed voted against. And that is the end of this portion of the meeting.
We will now convene back into our other committee board meetings. Can I please have your attention?
Downtown? I mean, are you at the doctor's office?
Roll on.
That's when you know something. Okay.
Thank you. At this time now, we'll enter into our Audit and Finance Committee meeting review.
Board members, this is an information item. We will vote on it later today, but just going through the items, you've got the audit report from our external audit for this year that'll be coming. They'll be presenting later this afternoon. Then as I go through, let me know if you've got any questions. TIF policy is intended to formalize a more thorough process of considering TIFs and hiring an outside group to do the work for you because that's not something our staff is set up to do in considering what will be the cost to the district of future proposed TIFs.
Todd, is there a policy that's going to be before us later to vote on?
Yes, it will be. With Luke C. Beckham High School, just approving funding with respect to open that up. Pre-K childhood development centralized screening is intent to spread the current screening for incoming kindergartners throughout the district and to be able to do it closer to parents, but to have a centralized process for doing that. Next is you'll have the capital sales tax building program, capital maintenance budget reallocation, followed by the fixed cost of ownership budget reallocation, a capital maintenance plan for the next 5 years, for the next 2 years, and then capital information technology plan for action. So none of that is for a vote right this minute, but will be coming forward at our meeting this afternoon. All right, and that's the extent of it, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Okay, so moving right along on the personnel policies, included in your packets were the policies that's coming up. There was a policy regarding student dress, and we had some input from Reverend Collins and from one of the school groups, a group of principals.
There you go, thank you.
Y'all couldn't hear me?
They could. We could. They could.
Oh, sorry about that.
We can hear you.
Okay. So we have the policy before us. I think I'm going to ask Natalie if she has any, you want to explain what's going on with the policies. And then we're going to ask Reverend Collins to kind of explain his recommendations. We considered them when we met, and my only concern was that I felt like a lot of what Reverend Collins was trying to accomplish is already covered in the student's code of conduct. I don't disagree about the dress, but I think it's already covered. But I wanted to make sure that Reverend Collins had the opportunity to explain his recommendations, and then Natalie can talk a minute about the faculty group or the principal group that had the other recommendation.
Yes, ma'am. Would you like for me to explain what those recommendations were from the principals group?
Explain who the group was first.
Sure. So I have Mr. Cobb. If you'll come to have this seat right here beside me. Mr. Cobb actually, we got an issue from a school, and it made me actually take a look at our uniform policy, and I noticed that there was a little bit of inconsistency with regards to what the policy states and what the form stated. So I asked John Cobb to step in and work with the principals of those schools to see if we could get some language that aligns to what the schools want or what they typically do, because the way that our policy was written was completely conflicting. And so it's my understanding that Mr. Cobb reached out to the schools that have uniforms and asked them kind of what was their preference, whether to get an exception to the uniform policy, whether or not they wanted it to be a process by which it was reviewed by someone and a decision was made, or whether they wanted it to be an automatic exemption. If you fill this form out, you're exempted from wearing the uniform. And John Cobb reached out to those principals, got feedback from them, and it's my understanding that the consensus was that they wanted it to be a process by which the executive director would handle any appeals from that process, and that decision would be final. And those are the changes that are recommended. I can't remember which color those are.
They're red.
Those are red.
Those are the red changes in the policy that you have.
That's correct.
Coming from that group, the group of principals. And thank you for your work on that. What's your name?
Cobb, Mr. Cobb.
Cobb. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Cobb on that part? Basically, okay, that was pretty simple.
And that is the only change being proposed by the district?
Correct.
Thank you.
And so the changes, what you see in blue are the recommendations from Reverend Collins. So Reverend Collins, do you want to just kind of give an overview? I mean, basically, you're concerned about the way students dress.
Yeah, I having 3 kids in schools myself and friends and family, I get to see quite a bit. So I first started hearing from other people in the public, why do new students have uniforms on? Why are they dressed that way? So for a while I paid no attention, and then that's why I did my wife actually one day, those kids don't have a dress code. She's a bitch. I can see the young lady's underwear from her skirt. I said, well, it's supposed to be the dress code. So I started taking a closer look at myself, and I saw it. I think I shared one picture with Kate, but our kids are kind of off the chain in the schools that don't have uniforms. And my intent is to make them decent, that they're covered up, they're respected, and that they're not known for what they show, but they're known for what they know. And that they carry themselves in ladylike manners and manners like gentlemen. So make the school and the classroom an environment for learning without distraction. That's why you see the writing in blue, trying to narrow down some things that I think are really eye-catchers for the opposite sex. This is just really to stay focused on school is my goal. That's why you see the blue changes. No other reason but to keep kids focused on school.
And you also have a copy of the code of conduct. That's included in your package so that you could kind of see, and some of the wording, I mean, like I said, some of the wording in Reverend Collins' recommendations were the same as what we have covered in the code of conduct right now. So
yeah, and also a lot of it's copied from what the adults have to wear, the adult dress code, professional dress code for the staff. A lot of the same language being passed down to the children too. Because going into high school and stuff, they need to start lining themselves up like young adults. So that's a lot of it came from the same thing that we already require for the adults to work for us.
The one comment that I would make, just based on experience, is if we start citing specific examples and we forget something, somebody's going to say, well, that's not covered. That is one thing that, looking at that, I mean, I just have found that over the years that, if you say, you can't wear short shorts, and for some reason you don't say a halter top, and somebody comes in a halter, they're gonna say, well, that's not in your policy. So that's one thing I think we gotta be a little bit cognizant of. So Kate, I saw your hand.
So, actually, Reverend Collins has been concerned about this for a while. We've talked about it for a while. And I do see, like, for example, leggings under prohibited attire in the Code of Conduct, and that's in Reverend Collins' motion, in his wording as well. And I just wonder, either Dr. Postwaite or staff, I mean, do we have schools where the Code of Conduct is being enforced really well, and so we don't have kids wearing leggings without a shirt covering for modesty, or where we don't, like, I know there, I have seen where children, most women or girls, I guess, are wearing shorts that you can't really even tell they have shorts on. So is this, and Reverend Collins and I discussed this, is it an issue where we have a policy and Code of Conduct in place, but we're not enforcing it in some places? Or do we need to say everybody needs to be wearing uniforms, which I'm sure somebody's going to, I think, scream at me about that, but.
Jennifer, you should probably say something.
I took the Code of Conduct as my cue to come forward. I would say several of those things are true. We have dress code issues in a lot of our schools, but they're very different. So your schools with uniform policies, the dress code violations are for not being in the proper uniform. Our dress code issues in our other schools are for inappropriate attire, as outlined in the Code of Conduct. I can say that I do believe that it is not always enforced to the letter of the policy, because it's very time intensive to do that. It's also, there's also issues if a male administrator addresses a female student's clothing, things come up with that. So it is definitely a policy that the Code of Conduct Committee has talked about many times in the last few years as probably needing some work. But we've done some other policies first, but I do think that we have a lot of issues around dress code, but they're different depending on whether a school is a uniform school or a non-uniform school. I don't know if that helps or not,
Yeah,
but.
thank you.
Yeah, just, I certainly respect Reverend Collins' effort on this, but you could take any one of these and go, well, leggings, as long as they had a skirt on, was okay, and then we start getting it, I mean, and I'm really, the problem is right now, because it's widely addressing things, you're leaving in the subjectivity of one person in a school. I mean, I'd like to send this back with your group and Reverend Collins and Ms. Green and others to work on this to try and tighten it up a little bit, because as it is, I'm afraid it's hardly enforceable, and there's some things that, for instance, a tattoo, which, 20 years ago, we all would have gone, oh my God, a tattoo. Today, they're everywhere. I just don't know what the right balance is here in this. I think it needs to be addressed. I just don't know if it's got it wrapped up well enough.
That's already policy too, the tattoo, it's already policy.
Some of it is, but.
Okay.
Having been a high school teacher, these are very hard to enforce, and I think when you get very specific, it makes it even harder. Administrators have a lot to do, and I'm not saying that dress is we should let it go, because ever since I was I mean, it's always a problem in high schools. Kids are going to try and push this. So I like the policy because it's more of an overview, and then we just discuss it with administrators. But there's also a time factor in schools that there just isn't enough time in a day to deal with all of, whether this is a mini skirt or not a mini skirt, And so logistically, I think it's hard. But I think that, I don't know, maybe overviewing with the principals at the beginning of the year and kids, and try to enforce it equally throughout the school district. But I think these specifics are too specific.
Cindy?
I agree. I think that we definitely want to make sure we address this as part of your group, and I would ask you to include Reverend Collins in those conversations and in those committee meetings. But we don't have to think a couple of years ago when we found out what happens when a principal in one of our schools thinks one thing and a parent whose child attends that school thinks the other thing. Right. And one of the problems is I'm not sure if I'm wearing tight clothing now or not, and it becomes very subjective. So I agree with Priscilla. I mean, we've got to have something, But I really, as a person who's had to enforce those, you want to leave out as many subjective words as possible, because we don't need conversations going on about, excessively form-fitting. That's going to open us up to at least a social media firestorm, at best, and a lawsuit. Frayed or torn, very well defined. So I think that we have a jumping off point, but I would like to see that we're in a little bit less subjective area. I don't want to put our staff in that position.
So Reverend Collins, would you be willing to to suspend your recommendations to work with the Code of Conduct Committee, if that's appropriate?
Absolutely. And let me say this too, and Ms. Coates, you brought out a good point, but what you see in the blue, most of that is already policy, and most of it is exact words already.
Right.
We have a professional self-dress. I didn't agree to that. That's what we use already, and you have to understand that the mind that framed it up was trying to prevent sexual distractions in school. And in the work environment. That's the whole goal of it. And these kids they're smart. If you go on social media, even Facebook, you will see our children, how they're dressed. And they're dressing in certain ways to draw attention. And I learned through my own child, by looking at her Facebook page, there was a couple of 50-year-old guys chasing after her. She's only 13 years old. They're 50-year-old men coming after my own child. So I know other parents experiencing probably aren't following, but these predators are out there. In fact, a guy got arrested about 2 weeks ago for going after a 13-year-old girl. So we can say, well, it's too much, or it's too this, too that. Another one idea is we can make a policy. You cover up from your neck to your knees. You cover you in loose-fitting clothing. That kind of solves everything. Loose-fitting clothes from your neck down to your knees. I think that'll solve a lot of harassment. But yes, I'm willing to work with anybody, especially Ms. Green and all of you guys.
And I'm happy to work with you guys as well. I guess my question then becomes holding up the other part of the policy so we don't have to address the policy twice. Because the other part of the policy, obviously, nobody has any problems with. So I
would like to make a motion that we go ahead and accept first reading of the district's proposed change language and request that the district work with Reverend Collins to create other language at a future time. So let's keep this moving forward so it does help with because that's not even dealing with student attire, it's specifically dealing with uniform policy, and I agree, we need to get that into the public arena soon if we're going to change it.
A second.
Okay. And Kate, I saw your hand.
A question. So any of these changes that we make, let's say we do first reading now and we do second reading in January, will those go into effect in this school year, or will they wait and go into effect next school year?
Well, that'll be up to us to decide. We can decide that.
Next school year.
Next school year, because the Code of Conduct is printed.
Has already been printed.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that, and I'm sure that if we do pass first reading on the red changes, that we make sure we follow through with what Reverend Collins' concerns are, and it may be updating student code of conduct. As you said, Ms. Coker, it may be more enforcement at some schools. I guess it'll depend on what the needs are.
Since it came to the policy committee, Natalie and I will make sure we get with her and get Reverend Collins involved. I'll make sure we stay on that to try to get that taken care of before our January meeting.
Just remember, you got somebody on this end with a hand up. But
oh, I'm sorry.
I'm done.
I didn't see you.
Let's spend too much time on this. Go ahead.
I didn't see you. I certainly was not trying to ignore you, Mr. Hollingshead. So we have a motion and a second.
I think to be very clear, we need to approve first. Oh, I see it now. I'm sorry.
You might want to include John Cobb too, because I think he sat down.
I will make sure.
Some of this language is rougher than mine.
Thank y'all very much for your input. We'll be back in touch.
Some language is rougher than mine. Reading the guidelines. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me get it back up. Okay, I'm voting now.
There you go. So the motion passes.
Time, yep.
The second policy that you had was the TIF policy that Todd referenced. And I think the logic behind this is pretty much to put a policy in place so that all boards moving forward would kind of understand the intent behind those TIFs that we wanted to support. So Todd,
I would make a motion to approve the policy.
Okay.
Second?
And just as a brief explanation, this Carol Clark, the district's outside attorney regarding this issue, wrote this policy, and the intent is boards are typically approached by a third-party taxing entity with 30 days to say yes or no. And so this is to put a process in place, requesting from them at least 90 days for the district to hire an outside expert to go analyze how much is this, no kidding, going to cost us, because in the past we've seen a TIF request. The person asking for it gave us a number that drastically differed in how it would affect us based on our own assessments. So the intent is to get a third party to go out and assess it, and then to bring back a recommendation. If for some reason the third party entities come to us with less than 90 days notice, it directs the superintendent to send a letter saying that we don't have time to consider it and will not participate. So.
And it has been reviewed by Audit and Finance Committee.
Correct, yeah.
Right. Cindy?
So first, I hesitate to create policies that kind of says you can go do stuff, but I got to tell you, this one was written very well, particularly when it says we're going to engage a third-party entity paid for by the other people. So kudos to you for that. I just want to make sure that we're not bumping up against state law or any municipalities that, if they're not required to give us 90-day notice, are we able to legally tell them that we're, my question has been asked, Mr. I will defer the rest of my question to the other members of the board.
We specifically looked into that because that question, Todd, get me if I'm wrong, but didn't that question did come up, and we did look into that.
Yeah.
Isn't that right? Yeah.
I mean, we can't compel the state to do something that state law already says, so we can ask.
This is just telling the superintendent that if they don't, then send a no, thank you.
Cover us because it could be during the summer when we're not meeting or something like that.
Right.
So it says that if you're not willing to give us the 90 days, which you're willing to exempt yourself from the law, we're just going to have to say no.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
The other part of my question had to do with moving from a 60% of the board to a supermajority, and it makes no reference to of those present. And so just for everybody's clarification, we've run into this on city council in a few cases where people say you got to have a majority or whatever, or planning commission. Well, if only 3 people show up out of a 6-member body.
To decide.
This actually is a better protection, so I just commend you for having that in there, because this really means basically 7 people have to show up and vote for it to happen. So this is a way of protecting the district.
And
So
that was the intent.
Nice work.
Yeah, that was the intent. So are there any other questions?
Call it.
Okay. You would cast your vote? So the motion is passed.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure which Mr. Chair I'm referring to.
Obviously not me.
But the next item is talking about determined agenda items to move to December 16th board meeting consent agenda. Anything that I voted no on, clearly there's a supermajority voting yes on it, and I would say go ahead and put it on potential consent. I don't know that anybody is going to change their vote from 3:30 to 5:30 today. We've discussed it. Our job now is to implement with fidelity. So if it even is in my part a saying no, I would vote that we put those items in potential consent.
Right?
I mean, if you're the only one,
No, I'm just saying that there are other people that can have their opinion. I'm saying right now, but if I'm a no vote, I would fully support putting it in potential consent.
So, I don't want a petition for a vote.
Yeah, in all due respect, I would like for us to continue with the policy as outlined, and we will just, address those items accordingly. If it's not unanimous in committee of the whole, then we will follow through in the regular board meeting.
Okay.
All right.
Can I tell you what those items are then to move
Sure.
to? So the items right now.
Well, we aren't moving them anyways, right?
No, the ones that are unanimous, we would move
Oh,
to
okay.
consent. So the ones that were unanimous that we would move to consent were item 3B, the innovation and the electives class, 3F, the Sullivan's Island to constituent magnet, 4B, the policy JICA that we just talked about, and then 4C, the tax increment financing policy.
Can you say that one more time? Because I thought I voted against the Sullivan's Island one.
Julie's going to double check, but right now it is item 3B, the innovation.
This is off of the committee of the whole numbers, not the,
Yeah, this is off of the committee of the whole. These are the items that we would move.
By unanimous
You know what, though?
consent.
I am looking at board agenda items, I think,
Mhm.
numbers.
no, you're looking at,
No, you're looking at the right
Okay,
one.
Right,
Yep.
thank you. So the 3B, the innovation and.
That's going to consent.
Sullivan's Island, Julie's checking on, and then policy 4B, policy JICA, which was the dress code, and 4C, which was the TIF. That's the one that I have. I got 9. And for Sullivan's Island, it was 9, it was 9-0.
So the ones that are under potential consent, when did we vote on that grandfathering provision? I don't even remember that.
On November 11th. And it was unanimous then.
So that's 3B, 3F, 4B, 4C?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, do we need to vote on those, or just, are we agreeing?
No, those will automatically go to consent.
Okay.
All right, our upcoming meetings, January 13th and 27th. The committee hold on the 13th and the regular board meeting on the 27th. Entertain a motion to adjourn this portion, I'm sorry, of the committee of the whole. We will reconvene at approximately
The agenda says approximately 4:15. Can we do
approximately
it?
4:15. So can we do 4:30, allow you to have a break and do everything else?
Do 4:30?
Executive session or what?
You have 30 minutes.
Got to go back in there.
Yeah, it's 4:45. Can we not do 4:15?
Can we go through everything and go into executive session and then take a break?
advertise, we ought to wait.
So hang on. Just so we all be on the same page. We will reconvene at 4:15.
Right.
Kate, can I see you for a moment, please?
Yep, just a sec. Give me 2